Okay, Scantron Test Prep 7 is working with fractions. So we're going to start with dividing fractions. We are not going to cover multiplying fractions because within dividing you actually have to multiply. So that's doing two things at once. Our first problem is 2/5 divided by 8/9. So when we have this problem, we have to remember our little trick. Keep, change, and flip. If you need to remember Kentucky Chicken Fried, that's fine too. So we will keep the first, we change our sign, and then we flip the second fraction. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and crisscross reduce so that I don't have to simplify later. So I noticed that the 2 and the 8 are both divisible by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 8 divided by 2 is 4. There's nothing to crisscross reduce here. So I'll move on. Multiply 1 times 9 and get 9. 5 times 4 and get 20. Double check. There's nothing to reduce because 20 is not divisible by 9 or 3. So that's our final answer. If you're given a problem where you're multiplying, there's no keep, change, flip. That is only for division. If they give you multiplying, you just multiply across the top and across the bottom and simplify your answer. All right, now let's work with a mixed fraction. If we have 6 and 3/5, and we want to divide that by 3 and 2/3. So the first step in this problem is to change our mixed number into improper fractions. So we'll take 6 and multiply it times 5 to get 30, and then add 3, which will give us 33, and then we keep the denominator the same. Go ahead and keep your division sign right now. Now let's change this mixed number to improper. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11, and the denominator is 3. Now I am ready for keep, change, and flip. Keep the first, change the sign, flip the second. Okay, before I move on, I'm going to look for crisscross reduce. 11 and 33 are both divisible by 11. 33 divided by 11 is 3, and 11 divided by 11 is 1. Cannot crisscross reduce here. I'm ready to multiply. 3 times 3 is 9. 5 times 1 is 5. Now, my answer is not finished because it's not simplified, because this is an improper fraction. Please be careful on the test, though. This type of answer will be a distractor answer that's wrong because it's not in simplest form. They're seeing if you're reducing and simplifying. So now I have to change this into a mixed number. 5 will go into 9 one time with 4 left over, and the denominator stays the same. Okay, let me show you up here what I just did to change this improper fraction to a mixed number. I did the turn it on its side and divide. 9 divided by 5. 5 went into 9 one time. 1 times 5 was 5. I subtracted and got 4. So notice that my whole number is 1. My remainder is the numerator. My denominator stays the same. Okay, so in problem 3, we're going to take a whole number and divide it by a fraction. So when we have this, we want to put our whole number over 1 to make it a fraction. Go ahead and write your division sign. Now we can write keep, change, flip. Keep the first, change the sign, flip the second. Multiply across the top. 6 times 2 is 12, and 1 times 1 is 1. 12 over 1 is 12. Okay, are there any questions about dividing or multiplying fractions? because you're trying to figure out how many times 1/2 will fit into 6. Sometimes when we do look at a problem like this, our first thing would be, oh, well, that's going to be 3. But yeah, no, that's not it. You're trying to think about how many times will 1/2 fit inside 6, and 1/2 will fit inside 6 12 times. Okay, so let's look at some subtraction problems. So let's say we have 7 4/5, and we want to subtract 3 2/9. Okay, step 1, if you have a problem that's written horizontally, I recommend that you rewrite it vertically. It helps when you're finding your common denominator. Okay, so we need a common denominator between 5 and 9 so that we can make equivalent fractions and then subtract, because you cannot just subtract with these numbers as they are. So if you're looking at these and you're struggling to find a common denominator, what you can do is use our ladder method that we use for the least common multiple. You'll remember the ladder, you draw it like this, and then we have to think, okay, what number can come out of 5 and 9 evenly? Well, only 1. So then you bring down the 5, you bring down the 9, and then you multiply everything together that's on the outside for your least common multiple. 1 times 5 times 9 is 45. So your least common multiple, which is the same as your least common denominator in this case, will be 45. So we're going to change our denominators to 45. So we'll start here. 5 times 9 is 45. So then 4 times 9, 36. And here, 9 times 5 is 45. So then 2 times 5 is 10. Now remember, when we've done this conversion, we have not added anything to it. We've not changed the value of these fractions. We have simply found equivalent fractions. And just to show you that, up here to the side, let's compare this 2/9 compared to the 10 over 45. And remember, when we're comparing fractions, there's a little shortcut that I called Mickey Mouse multiply. Remember, 9 times 10 would be 90. 45 times 2 is also 90. So remember, the Mickey Mouse ears are equal, so they're equivalent fractions there. All right, so that's what I'm trying to say, is that we've not changed the value. We've simply renamed it to something else so that we can subtract. All right, now we can bring our whole numbers over and finish with our problem. So then 36 minus 10 is 26. That'll be over 45. Those denominators stay the same. And then 7 minus 3 is 4. Okay, at this point, we need to double check and make sure that fraction can't be reduced. And when we look, we can't find anything that will simplify it any further. So that's our final answer. If we're adding fractions, we also have to have a common denominator. That's why I think that adding and subtracting fractions is a little bit harder than the multiplying in this case, because of having to find that common denominator. Okay, you'll also have a problem that looks like this. It's an improper fraction. And what they'll want you to do is change it to a mixed number. But they don't say it quite like that. What they say is, find the mixed number in lowest terms. Or they might say, reduce your answer to lowest terms. So if you see that, what we're doing is changing this to a mixed number. Okay, so we have to know how many times 18 will fit inside 55. And then we'll find the leftovers. So we turn it on its side and divide. So 55 divided by 18. Okay, so 18 will fit inside 3 times. 3 times 18 is 54. We subtract and get a remainder of 1. So our whole number will be 3. Our numerator is 1. And our denominator stays the same. And if you need to, you could circle these numbers and draw arrows to remind yourself of what goes where when you're on your own in just a few minutes. Okay, the final type of problem will give you some fractions. And they will say to find the least common denominator. Find the least common denominator. Okay, so we have 3 numbers now that we'll have to put inside of our ladder. So this works out a little bit differently, I'll show you, than just a 2-number ladder. Okay, so least common denominator is just like least common multiple. That's why we can use our ladder. So 3, 4, and 9 only have a 1 in common between all 3. So that actually is our greatest common factor, just in case you get one of those questions. All right, so then you bring down the 3, you bring down the 4, you bring down the 9. So there will be a number I can take from 3 and 9. So you indent your ladder a little bit. And the reason we do that is to show where the break is for our GCF, which was here. And so I know that 3 can come from 3 and 9. So I'm going to put the 3 here. And 3 goes into 3 once. We were not pulling anything out of the 4, so I just bring it down. And then the 3 goes into the 9 3 times. Okay, now they're all simplified. So for the least common denominator, I multiply everything here. So I'll be multiplying 1 times 3 times 1 times 4 times 3 to get 36 for my least common denominator.